You check your bank account in private, don't you? That moment when no one is watching, when you can drop the mask of contentment and face the numbers that never seem to match the life you know you're capable of living. You've probably told yourself you don't care about money, that you're above such concerns, but late at night, when the world is quiet, you wonder why wealth flows so easily to others while you remain invisible to its current. I am Solomon, and I built an empire not through luck or birthright, but by understanding a truth that most will never grasp. Money doesn't chase the desperate or the greedy. It seeks those who have become worthy of its power, those who have developed the internal architecture to handle its weight without being crushed by it. What you're about to discover will disturb you, because it will show you that your relationship with wealth has been backwards from the beginning. You've been hunting money when you should have been building the character that makes money hunt you. You've been focused on getting when you should have been focused on becoming. There are 7 unmistakable signs that mark someone ready to receive true wealth in silence, without fanfare, without the need to prove anything to anyone. These aren't strategies or tricks. They are transformations of identity that create an invisible magnetism around you, a gravitational pull that draws resources, opportunities, and abundance into your orbit naturally. This isn't about positive thinking or manifestation games. This is about the hard, uncomfortable work of becoming the kind of person that money trusts with its power. It's about developing the internal strength to receive wealth without losing your soul to it. If you felt that persistent ache of knowing you're meant for more, if you're tired of watching others live the life that feels rightfully yours, then what you're about to learn will either transform you completely or reveal that you're not yet ready for the responsibility that comes with true prosperity. The question isn't whether you want to be rich. The question is whether you're prepared to become the person who deserves to be rich. If you're ready to find out, if you're ready to do the work that most people will never do, then subscribe now and let me show you the path that leads from where you are to where money is waiting for you. Number 1, loving silence more than approval. You know that moment when you reach for your phone to share a decision you just made, don't you? That instant reflex to seek validation, to soften the weight of your own choice by wrapping it in other people's opinions. You disguise it as seeking advice, but what you're really doing is running from the terrifying responsibility of trusting yourself. And this single weakness, is what keeps money at a distance from you. I have watched kingdoms rise and fall, and I can tell you this with absolute certainty. Every poor financial decision begins with the inability to sit alone with your own judgment. When you need others to approve your choices, you are no longer making choices. You are performing for an audience that doesn't have to live with the consequences of what you decide. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because it will disturb the very foundation of how you approach wealth. Money flows toward those who can bear the weight of solitary decision-making. It seeks out the rare souls who have learned to love silence more than applause, who find peace in their own counsel more than comfort in the crowd's consensus. Think of a desert well deep and still. On the surface there is noise, the wind, the shifting sand, the chatter of passing travelers who drink quickly and move on. But the water, the life-giving essence, comes from the depths where silence reigns eternal. This is the metaphor for your relationship with wisdom. The surface is where everyone else lives, where opinions fly like dust in the wind, where validation is cheap and plentiful but ultimately worthless. The depths, where silence dwells, that's where the pure water of discernment springs forth. I once knew a young merchant in my kingdom, brilliant and ambitious, who came from a family of traders. He understood markets, he could read people, he had every advantage except one. He could not make a decision without consulting half the city. Every investment required a council of friends. Every business move needed approval from his family. Every opportunity was filtered through the fears and limited vision of people who had never built what he was trying to build. Within 2 years, he was bankrupt. Not because his instincts were wrong, but because by the time he had gathered enough approval for his decisions, the opportunities had already passed to men who could act on their own conviction. He would identify the right investment, spend weeks seeking validation, and watch helplessly as someone else seized what should have been his. The cruel irony was that the very people whose approval he craved were not qualified to give it. His family had never scaled a business beyond their small local operation. His friends were employees who had never risked their own capital, yet he gave their fears more weight than his own informed analysis. Here is what you must understand. Leadership in wealth requires the courage to make unpopular decisions. When I chose to build the temple, it required resources that many thought would be better spent on immediate military needs. The people wanted visible security. I was investing in eternal legacy. Popular opinion favored the short-term comfort. Wisdom demanded long-term vision. There were nights when I stood alone on the palace roof, questioning my own judgment, feeling the weight of disapproval from advisors who could not see beyond the next harvest season. But I had learned something that most never learn: the ability to sit with uncertainty, to hold a decision in silence, to let it settle in the deep waters of contemplation, rather than rushing to the shallow pools of public opinion for relief. This is where most people fail themselves. They cannot bear the anxiety of not knowing immediately whether they are right. They need constant reassurance, like children who cannot sleep without someone else in the room. But wealth, real wealth, is built in the dark hours when you must trust yourself completely, when you must act on incomplete information, when you must choose a path that others cannot yet see the wisdom of walking. Silence forces you to confront the hard questions that approval-seeking allows you to avoid. Why do you really want money? Not the noble reasons you tell others, but the raw, honest motivations that drive you when no one is watching. How will you handle the moment when building your wealth requires firing someone you genuinely like? What will happen to your marriage when your income creates a disparity that threatens your partner's sense of worth? How will you maintain your values when profitable opportunities conflict with your principles? These questions have no comfortable answers. They require you to sit in the discomfort of not knowing, of grappling with complexity that cannot be resolved by asking your friends what they think. The people who love you will try to protect you from risk. The people who envy you will try to sabotage your ambition. Neither group is qualified to make your financial decisions. I want you to understand something that will change how you see every choice you make from this moment forward. Every time you seek approval before acting on your own judgment, you are training yourself to be financially dependent. You are reinforcing the neural pathways that keep you small, that keep you waiting for permission to claim what is already yours by right of vision and effort. The wealthy do not ask permission. They do not conduct polls before making investments. They do not need their decisions validated by people who have never built what they are building. They have learned to love the silence where wisdom lives, to find comfort in their own counsel, to trust the deep waters of their own discernment more than the shallow noise of public opinion. Here is your practice, and I warn you, it will be more difficult than you imagine. Every day for the next 15 minutes, sit in absolute silence. Not meditation, not prayer, not planning your day. Pure silence. No music, no distractions. No escape from the anxiety that will rise when you are alone with your own thoughts. In that silence, you will discover something extraordinary. You will find that beneath the noise of other people's opinions, beneath your own habitual need for validation, there is a voice. Quiet but clear, uncertain but authentic, imperfect but entirely your own. That voice is your financial future. It is the part of you that knows what you need to do, that sees opportunities others miss, that understands timing in ways that cannot be explained to committees. Learning to love that silence more than the approval of others is not just a sign that you are ready for wealth. It is the very foundation upon which all lasting prosperity is built. Number 2, desiring wisdom more than profit. You chase numbers, don't you? You check your portfolio obsessively, calculate potential returns with the intensity of a mathematician, measure every opportunity by its immediate profit potential. And while you're busy counting money that doesn't yet exist, you're missing the one thing that actually creates wealth, the wisdom to know what to do when you have it. Here is a truth that will shatter your current approach to building wealth. There is a profound difference between being rich and being prosperous. Rich people have money. Prosperous people have the discernment to keep it, multiply it, and use it purposefully. Rich people win the lottery and lose it within 5 years. Prosperous people build empires that span generations. The fundamental error that keeps most people financially struggling is their belief that money is the goal. Money is never the goal. Money is always the consequence. It is the natural result of developing the character, judgment, and wisdom that make you trustworthy with its power. When you pursue profit directly, you become like a man trying to catch his own shadow. The harder you chase it, the more it eludes you. Listen to what happened when I was given the choice that would define my entire reign. The Creator appeared to me and offered anything I desired. Anything. Unlimited wealth, military victory over all enemies, the longest life in human history, the love of every woman I encountered. Every form of power and pleasure was available to me in that moment. Do you know what I asked for? Wisdom. The discernment to govern justly, the understanding to distinguish between good and evil, the depth of judgment that would allow me to guide my people toward true prosperity. Not gold, not territory, not years of life, wisdom. And what happened as a result of that choice changed everything I understood about the relationship between wisdom and wealth. Because I had chosen wisdom over riches, riches flowed to me in quantities that no king before or after has ever experienced. The gold came because I had developed the character to handle gold. The influence expanded because I had proven I would not abuse influence. The opportunities multiplied because I had demonstrated the judgment to choose opportunities wisely. This is the paradox that most will never grasp. When you prioritize wisdom over profit, profit becomes inevitable. When you develop the internal architecture to handle wealth responsibly, wealth seeks you out. When you prove yourself trustworthy with small matters of judgment, larger matters of abundance trust themselves to your care. Think of a tree in your mind. Picture it clearly. The branches heavy with fruit, the trunk strong and stable, the roots deep and widespread beneath the surface. Now here is what most people do. They focus entirely on the fruit. They want bigger fruit, more fruit, faster fruit. They might even try to tie artificial fruit to the branches, creating the illusion of prosperity without the substance. But the wise person understands that the fruit is simply the natural expression of what is happening in the root system. Strong roots create healthy trees. Healthy trees produce abundant fruit. The fruit is not the source, it is the result. Wisdom is the root system of wealth. Judgment, discernment, integrity, patience, understanding. These are the underground realities that produce the visible abundance above ground. Let me tell you about a spice merchant who came to trade in my kingdom. He was known throughout the region for his shrewd negotiating and his impressive profits. When he arrived, he was offered 2 opportunities. The first was a large quantity of rare saffron at an unusually low price. The second was a smaller amount of common cinnamon at standard rates, but from a source known for exceptional quality and reliability. The merchant's eyes lit up at the saffron deal. The profit margins were extraordinary. Without examining the goods carefully, without investigating why the price was so low, without questioning the seller's motivations, he committed his entire trading budget to the saffron purchase. He was thinking only of the numbers, the immediate return on investment, the profit that seemed too good to refuse. Within days, he discovered the truth. The saffron had been damaged by moisture during transport. Half of it was unusable, and the rest was of such poor quality that no discerning buyer would purchase it. Meanwhile, the merchant who had chosen the smaller cinnamon deal built a reputation for reliability and quality that led to exclusive trading relationships worth 10 times the saffron profit. One merchant chased profit and lost everything. The other prioritized wisdom, chose quality over quick gain, and built lasting prosperity. This is not a story about luck. This is a story about the inevitable consequences of two fundamentally different approaches to wealth. Throughout my reign, I was constantly tested on this principle. Tribute would arrive from kingdoms seeking favorable treatment. Gold, precious stones, exotic goods would be offered in exchange for policies that would benefit the givers at the expense of justice. Every time, I had to choose between immediate profit and long-term integrity. I remember one particular incident when a delegation from a wealthy trading city offered me a stunning amount of gold in exchange for adjusting our trade laws to favor their merchants over our own people. The gold they showed me was more than some kingdoms possessed in their entire treasuries. My advisors were practically salivating at the prospect of such wealth flowing into our coffers. But I had learned to ask different questions. Not how much profit will this bring, but what kind of kingdom will this create? What precedent does this set? What happens when other nations see that Solomon's justice can be purchased? What becomes of my people's trust when they discover their king has sold their interests for gold? The choice was clear, though not easy. I refused the tribute and sent the delegation away. Some called it financial foolishness. But within the year, 3 other kingdoms approached us with even larger offers, not to purchase injustice, but to secure alliances with a king they could trust to keep his word. Our reputation for integrity became our greatest asset, attracting honest trade relationships that generated far more wealth than any single corrupt deal could have produced. This is what you must understand about the relationship between wisdom and wealth. Life is constantly testing whether you are ready for greater responsibility. Every ethical choice is an examination. Every moment when you must choose between quick profit and long-term integrity is a qualification test for higher levels of abundance. When you choose wisdom over immediate gain, you are sending a signal to the universe that you can be trusted with more. When you demonstrate that your character cannot be purchased, you become the kind of person that lasting opportunities seek out. When you prove that you will not sacrifice your principles for profit, you become worthy of profits that require no sacrifice of principle. But when you chase money directly, when you prioritize profit over judgment, you reveal yourself as someone who cannot handle wealth responsibly. And the universe, in its infinite wisdom, protects itself by ensuring that irresponsible people do not receive more than they can manage without causing harm to themselves and others. The practice is simple but challenging. Before every financial decision, ask yourself not, how much money will this make me? But what kind of person will this choice make me? What am I learning about discernment, patience, integrity, and judgment through this opportunity? How is this building the wisdom that creates lasting prosperity? When wisdom becomes your priority, profit becomes your natural consequence. When character becomes your foundation, wealth becomes your inevitable expression. Number 3, not idolizing comfort. You use money to avoid feeling things, don't you? That expensive dinner to distract from loneliness. That shopping spree to numb disappointment. That vacation to escape the gnawing sense that your life lacks meaning. You have turned wealth into emotional anesthesia, and in doing so, you have revealed exactly why wealth continues to elude you. Money is not therapy. Abundance is not healing. Luxury is not love. And until you understand this distinction, until you stop trying to purchase peace for your wounded heart, you will remain trapped in a cycle of earning and spending that never delivers the satisfaction you desperately seek. Here is the truth that no one wants to hear. Money amplifies who you already are. It does not transform your essential nature, it reveals it. If you are anxious, wealth will give you more sophisticated things to worry about. If you are lonely, Riches will attract people who love your resources more than your soul. If you are empty, abundance will echo in the hollowness of your inner life. I learned this lesson in the most painful way possible. At the height of my wealth, when my kingdom was the wonder of the world, when gold flowed like water and every pleasure was available at my command, I found myself more restless than I had ever been as a young shepherd. The palaces could not fill the emptiness. The feasts could not satisfy the hunger. The entertainment could not silence the questions that haunted my quiet moments. Let me tell you about a prince from a neighboring kingdom who visited my court. He was young, handsome, intelligent, heir to vast wealth. But I could see in his eyes the same restless hunger that I recognized in my own mirror. He had come seeking not political alliance, but distraction. His kingdom bored him. His responsibilities felt meaningless. He was running from something inside himself that no external pleasure could resolve. During his stay, he threw himself into every indulgence available. He spent fortunes on elaborate parties, exotic foods, rare wines, beautiful companions. Each night brought new attempts to drown his inner discontent in increasingly extreme experiences. When one pleasure lost its effect, he would escalate to another, more costly, more stimulating, more numbing. I watched him spiral with the recognition of someone who had walked the same path. The tragedy was not that he was spending money recklessly. The tragedy was that he believed money could solve a problem it was never designed to address. He was trying to heal a spiritual wound with material bandages. He was attempting to fill an existential void with temporal pleasures. Within 6 months, this prince had damaged his reputation, alienated his family, and developed dependencies that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He returned to his kingdom a broken man, having learned the hard way that no amount of wealth can fix what is broken in the soul. The very riches he had used to escape his pain became the source of even greater suffering. This is the cruel mathematics of using money for emotional healing. Pleasure has diminishing returns, but wisdom has compounding returns. The more you seek satisfaction through external means, the more external stimulation you require to achieve the same level of temporary relief. But the more you develop inner wisdom, the more fascinated you become with life itself, the more purpose and meaning multiply in your experience. Here is a rule that I wish someone had taught me before I learned it through painful experience. If you cannot find peace in simplicity, you will not find it in abundance. If you cannot be content with little, you will not be satisfied with much. Money will amplify your discontent, not resolve it. The shift happened for me gradually, then suddenly. I began to notice that my happiest moments were not during the grand feasts or elaborate ceremonies, but in quiet conversations with wise men, in solving complex problems that benefited my people, in moments of genuine connection with friends who knew me before I was king. The simple pleasures, the ones that cost nothing, were the ones that fed my soul most deeply. I realized that I had been using my wealth backwards. Instead of allowing money to serve my purpose, I had been serving money's promise to deliver something it could never provide. Instead of treating wealth as a tool for meaningful impact, I had been treating it as medication for existential pain. The transformation began when I stopped asking, "What can I buy to make myself feel better?" and started asking, "How can I use what I have to create something meaningful? How can my resources serve a purpose larger than my own comfort? How can abundance become a vehicle for wisdom rather than an escape from reality?" This is what you must understand about the relationship between money and inner healing. Your emotional wounds are not obstacles to wealth. They are the very things that must be addressed before wealth can trust itself to your care. Money avoids people who will abuse it for emotional regulation, because money understands that such people will always need more and will never be satisfied with what they have. When you use wealth to avoid feeling your loneliness, your anger, your fear, your grief, you are training yourself to be financially codependent. You are creating a relationship with money that is based on neediness rather than stewardship, on avoidance rather than purpose, on consumption rather than creation. The practice is uncomfortable but essential. Identify the emotional wounds you are trying to heal with money. What feelings are you trying to avoid when you shop impulsively? What pain are you trying to numb when you spend beyond your means on entertainment or luxury? What emptiness are you trying to fill when you fantasize about having enough money to solve all your problems? Face those feelings directly. Sit with the loneliness without buying companionship. Feel the anxiety without purchasing temporary relief. Experience the meaninglessness without escaping into material distractions. This is not about becoming ascetic or rejecting abundance. This is about becoming emotionally mature enough to handle abundance responsibly. When you no longer need money to regulate your emotions, when you no longer depend on wealth to avoid uncomfortable feelings, when you can find peace and purpose regardless of your bank balance, then and only then are you ready to be trusted with the kind of wealth that can change not only your life, but the lives of everyone you touch. Money seeks those who will use it wisely, not those who will use it desperately. Abundance flows toward those who can receive it without losing themselves in it, who can possess wealth without being possessed by it, who can enjoy comfort without becoming addicted to it. Stop using money as emotional medicine and start developing the inner strength that makes medicine unnecessary. This is not just a sign of readiness for wealth. It is the foundation upon which lasting prosperity is built. Number 4, saying no to immediate desire. You want everything now, don't you? The success, the recognition, the bank account, the lifestyle. You scroll through social media and see others living what appears to be your dream life, and something inside you screams with impatience. Why them? Why not you? Why is this taking so long? And in that desperate urgency, in that inability to wait for the right timing, you reveal exactly why wealth continues to slip through your fingers like water. Let me tell you about the greatest project of my life, one that required something most people never develop: the ability to say no to immediate gratification for the sake of something infinitely more valuable. The temple took 7 years of preparation before we ever broke ground. 7 years of gathering materials, training craftsmen, developing techniques, establishing supply chains, building relationships with distant kingdoms who would provide the cedar and gold and precious stones. During those 7 years, there were countless voices urging me to start immediately with what we had. Build now with local stone, they said. Use available wood, they insisted. The people need to see progress, they demanded. Every delay felt like failure to those who could not see beyond the next harvest season. But I had learned something that most never learn: the difference between building quickly and building eternally. The urgent is almost always the enemy of the important. The immediate is almost always the saboteur of the permanent. What can be rushed is rarely worth having, and what is worth having can rarely be rushed. Think of a seed planted in rich soil. Picture it in your mind, small, seemingly insignificant, containing within itself the potential for a mighty tree. Now imagine an impatient gardener who cannot bear the silence of waiting, who digs up the seed every few days to check its progress, who waters it obsessively, who tries to force growth through sheer will and anxiety. What happens to that seed? It dies. Not because it lacked potential, but because it was not given the time and undisturbed conditions necessary for natural development. The very impatience that was meant to accelerate its growth becomes the force that destroys it entirely. This is precisely what happens to most people's financial potential. They have the right instincts, they identify the right opportunities, they even make the right initial decisions. But then impatience takes over. They dig up their investments to check progress. They abandon strategies before they have time to work. They jump from opportunity to opportunity, never staying long enough to harvest the compound growth that only comes with time. I once knew 2 merchants who had the same idea at the same time. importing a particular spice that was becoming popular in neighboring kingdoms. Both men had access to similar resources, similar knowledge, similar opportunities. The difference between them was their relationship with time. The first merchant wanted immediate results. He rushed into the largest purchase he could afford, borrowed money to expand quickly, pushed his suppliers for faster delivery, cut corners on quality control to get products to market before anyone else. Within 6 months, he had captured significant market share and was celebrating his apparent success. The second merchant took a different approach. He started with small test purchases to understand quality variations. He spent months building relationships with the most reliable suppliers. He studied seasonal patterns and demand cycles. He slowly built a reputation for consistent excellence rather than rushing to capture immediate market share. 1 year later, the first merchant was bankrupt. His rushed approach had led to quality problems that destroyed his reputation. His borrowed capital became a crushing burden when demand proved more seasonal than he had anticipated. His suppliers, pushed too hard too fast, had found more reasonable customers and abandoned him when he needed them most. The second merchant, meanwhile, had built a sustainable business that continued growing for decades. His patient approach had allowed him to navigate the inevitable challenges that the first merchant never saw coming. His reputation for reliability had created customer loyalty that no competitor could break. His measured growth had kept him financially stable through market fluctuations that destroyed hasty businesses. This is not a story about luck or timing. This is a story about the inevitable consequences of two fundamentally different relationships with immediate desire. One man could not bear the anxiety of slow progress. The other had learned that anxiety about timing is almost always a sign that you are focused on the wrong things. Patience is not passivity. True patience is the most active thing you can do because it requires you to continue working when you cannot see immediate results, to keep building when others question your progress, to maintain consistency when inconsistency would feel more natural. I remember a specific moment when this principle was tested in the most practical way. A neighboring kingdom offered me a trade deal that would have immediately doubled our gold reserves. The terms seemed favorable, the timing appeared perfect, the opportunity felt urgent. My advisors were unanimous in their enthusiasm for the immediate windfall. But something felt wrong about the eagerness of the offer. When someone is too anxious for you to say yes, when they create artificial urgency around a decision, when they discourage you from taking time to consider, these are almost always signs that the decision will benefit them more than it will benefit you. I insisted on taking 30 days to study the proposal thoroughly. During those 30 days, my investigators discovered that the offering kingdom was facing internal political turmoil that made their long-term stability questionable. The deal that seemed too good to pass up was actually too risky to accept. 6 months later, that kingdom fell into civil war. Their currency became worthless, their trade relationships collapsed, and any kingdom that had tied its fortunes to theirs suffered significant losses. My patient investigation and willingness to delay immediate gratification had saved my people from disaster. This is what you must understand about the relationship between patience and wealth. Every time you choose long-term wisdom over short-term desire, you are making a deposit in the account of your character. Every time you say no to immediate gratification for the sake of sustained benefit, you are proving yourself trustworthy with greater opportunities. But every time you cannot resist the urgent, every time you abandon the plan because progress feels too slow, every time you let impatience override judgment, you are demonstrating that you are not yet ready for the kind of wealth that requires maturity to maintain. The practice is simple but challenging. Before making any significant financial decision, institute a waiting period. Give yourself time to investigate thoroughly, to consider unintended consequences, to separate genuine opportunity from artificial urgency. If the opportunity is real, it will survive scrutiny and time. If it is not, patience will reveal its flaws before you commit resources you cannot afford to lose. Fast money almost always appeals to anxious hearts. Lasting money requires disciplined minds and patient spirits. The choice between immediate gratification and enduring prosperity is a choice you make not once, but daily, in dozens of small decisions that either build the foundation for wealth or erode it grain by grain. Learn to say no to your immediate desires and yes to your ultimate destiny. This is not just a sign of readiness for wealth. It is the very capacity that makes wealth possible. Number 5. Seeing value where others see contempt. You dismiss things too quickly, don't you? The person who doesn't dress like success, the opportunity that seems too simple, the idea that comes from someone without credentials. You've trained your eyes to see only what looks valuable on the surface, and in doing so, you've become blind to the very opportunities that could transform your financial destiny. There is a particular blindness that affects those who chase wealth desperately. They become so focused on what everyone else recognizes as valuable that they miss the treasures hidden in plain sight. They look for gold in the places where everyone else is looking for gold, and then wonder why those places have already been picked clean by earlier seekers. Let me tell you something that will change how you see every person you meet, every opportunity you encounter, every idea that crosses your path. The greatest wealth is often found where the crowds refuse to look. Value and visibility are often inversely related. The most profitable opportunities frequently wear the disguise of insignificance. I learned this lesson from a man who saved my kingdom, but whose name was never recorded in our chronicles. He was poor, uneducated, regarded by everyone as insignificant. During a siege that threatened to destroy our capital, when all our military advisors were paralyzed by the complexity of our predicament, this forgotten man approached with a solution so simple that it seemed almost insulting to our sophisticated strategies. He suggested we redirect a small stream that flowed near the enemy camp, not to flood them dramatically, but to create just enough water shortage that they would have to break camp and move to a less strategic position. Our generals scoffed. Our military advisors dismissed him. Our nobles literally laughed at the simplicity of his suggestion. But something in his quiet confidence made me listen, not because he had credentials or reputation, but because his idea had a quality that all truly valuable insights possess. It was so obvious that no one else had seen it. While everyone was devising complex battle strategies and siege technologies, he had been observing basic human needs and environmental realities. We implemented his plan. Within 3 days, the enemy had broken their siege and retreated to a position where we could defeat them decisively. This uneducated man had accomplished what all our trained military minds could not. His wisdom had been invisible to everyone else precisely because they were looking for wisdom that looked like wisdom. Picture in your mind a gold nugget lying in mud. To the casual observer, it appears to be just another dirty rock. Hundreds of people might walk past it, seeing only the mud, dismissing it as worthless debris. But the person who understands the nature of gold, who knows that true value often hides beneath unproposing surfaces, that person recognizes the treasure that others overlook. This is a perfect metaphor for how opportunity works in the financial world. The most valuable ideas often come from unexpected sources. The most profitable investments frequently look unattractive to conventional wisdom. The people who could most benefit your business are often the ones who don't fit the profile of who you think you should be networking with. I once had a stable boy who worked with our horses. He was young, came from a poor family, had no education in military matters, but he spent his days observing the animals, understanding their behavior, learning their individual personalities and capabilities. While our cavalry officers were focused on formations and tactics, he was focused on the horses themselves. One day, he approached me with an observation that revolutionized our entire approach to cavalry warfare. He had noticed that certain horses performed better in different weather conditions, at different times of day, with different types of terrain. He suggested we match horses to missions based on these subtle characteristics, rather than simply using our strongest horses for our most important battles. The military establishment ridiculed the idea, a stable boy presuming to advise cavalry commanders. It seemed absurd, but I had learned to evaluate ideas based on their merit rather than the status of their source. We implemented his suggestions as an experiment. The results were extraordinary. Our cavalry became more effective than it had ever been, not because we acquired better horses, but because we deployed them more wisely. The stable boy's close observation and practical wisdom had revealed insights that years of formal military training had missed. That boy eventually became one of my most trusted advisors on matters of logistics and resource management. His ability to see value that others overlooked, combined with his lack of preconceptions about how things were supposed to work, made him invaluable in ways that traditional experts could never be. Here is what you must understand. Conventional wisdom is almost always conventional because it has been picked over by everyone else. If an opportunity is obvious to everyone, it has probably already been exploited by everyone. The real wealth lies in the insights that require deeper observation, broader thinking, or the courage to value what others dismiss. During my reign, I encountered numerous examples of this principle in action. The communication system that became one of our kingdom's greatest strategic advantages started with carrier pigeons that everyone initially thought were a frivolous novelty. Nobles mocked the idea of sending messages by bird when we had human messengers and signal fires. But I saw something others missed. Birds could carry messages along routes that were impossible for human messengers, at speeds that made coordinated responses feasible across vast distances, with a reliability that weather and terrain could not disrupt. What others saw as an amusing curiosity, I recognized as a revolutionary communication technology. Within 5 years, our pigeon network had become the envy of every surrounding kingdom. Information that used to take weeks to transmit could be communicated in days. Military coordination that was previously impossible became routine. Trade communications that were once prohibitively slow became efficiently manageable. The initial investment was minimal because no one else wanted what we were acquiring. The return was enormous because we had recognized value before it became obvious to others. This is the essence of seeing opportunity where others see insignificance. You must develop the ability to recognize potential before it becomes apparent to the crowd. The practice requires both intellectual humility and practical courage. Intellectual humility to listen to ideas regardless of their source, to consider possibilities that don't match your preconceptions, to investigate opportunities that others dismiss as beneath their attention. Practical courage to act on insights that others cannot yet see, to invest time and resources in possibilities that have not yet proven themselves to skeptical observers, to build relationships with people who don't fit conventional definitions of valuable connections. Train yourself to ask different questions when evaluating opportunities. Not does this look impressive, but does this solve a real problem? Not will others be envious of this association, but can I learn something valuable from this person? Not is this obviously profitable, but is this potentially transformative? The next time someone presents you with an idea and your first instinct is to dismiss it because of who they are or how simple it seems, pause, investigate, consider. The opportunity that everyone else overlooks might be the one that changes everything for you. True wealth flows to those who can see value before it becomes visible to others. This is not just a sign of financial readiness. It is the very skill that creates financial opportunity. Number 6. Understanding everything is a loan. You grip your possessions like a drowning man grips a rope, don't you? Every financial loss feels like death. Every market downturn triggers existential panic. Every change in your circumstances threatens your very identity. And in that desperate clutching, in that terror of impermanence, you reveal exactly why abundance continues to slip through your fingers like smoke. Here is the truth that will either liberate you completely or disturb you profoundly. You own nothing. Not your house, not your investments, not your business, not even the body you inhabit. Everything in your possession is a temporary loan from an existence that is itself temporary. You brought nothing into this world, and you will carry nothing out of it. This is not philosophical abstraction. This is practical reality. Every billionaire dies with the same net worth, 0. Every empire falls. Every fortune dissolves. Every accumulation returns to the elements from which it came. The only question is whether you will spend your life anxiously trying to possess what cannot be possessed, or wisely stewarding what has been temporarily entrusted to your care. The shift from ownership to stewardship is not just a mental exercise. It is the transformation that allows money to flow freely toward you. Resources seek out those who will use them responsibly rather than clutch them desperately. Abundance gravitates toward those who understand its temporary nature, rather than those who worship it as permanent security. Let me share with you an image that changed my entire relationship with wealth. Imagine a gardener who has been entrusted with a magnificent estate. He does not own the land, but he has been given complete authority over its cultivation and development. He could hoard every seed, paranoid about scarcity. He could refuse to plant anything, terrified of loss. He could neglect the soil, overwhelmed by the responsibility. Or he could embrace his role as steward. He could plant generously, knowing that abundance shared multiplies. He could invest in improvements that will outlast his tenure. He could find deep satisfaction in nurturing growth that will benefit others long after his stewardship has ended. Which gardener do you think the estate owner would trust with additional properties? Which one would receive more resources to manage? Which one would find joy and purpose in his temporary role rather than anxiety and grasping? This is precisely your situation with every dollar that passes through your hands. You are not the owner, you are the steward. The question is whether you will be an anxious hoarder or a wise cultivator. I learned this lesson in the most practical way possible. Early in my reign, I became obsessed with accumulating gold, not for any specific purpose, but simply for the security I imagined it would provide. I hoarded vast quantities of precious metals in secure vaults, rarely using them for anything productive, simply counting them like a miser counts coins. The gold sat idle while my kingdom had genuine needs that those resources could have addressed, roads that could have been improved, bridges that could have been built, educational systems that could have been established, trading relationships that could have been developed. Instead, my treasure gathered dust while opportunities for meaningful impact were neglected. One night, I found myself in the treasury, surrounded by more wealth than most kingdoms possessed, feeling profoundly empty and purposeless. The gold that I thought would provide security had become a burden of anxiety. I was constantly worried about theft, about depreciation, about whether I had enough, about whether others might acquire more. That night, I understood something that changed everything. Unused wealth is not security. It is spiritual rot. Resources that are hoarded rather than stewarded become sources of anxiety rather than tools of empowerment. Money that is clutched rather than circulated loses its life force and becomes a dead weight on the soul. I began to shift my perspective gradually but decisively. Instead of asking, "How can I protect what I have?" I started asking, "How can I use what has been entrusted to me to create lasting value?" Instead of hoarding for imaginary security, I began investing in permanent improvements that would outlast my reign. The results were counterintuitive but profound. The more I gave away, the more flowed back to me. The more I invested in others, the more opportunities returned to benefit my kingdom. The more I treated my wealth as a loan to be stewarded wisely, the more wealth trusted itself to my care. This is the paradox that most people never discover. When you hold wealth lightly, it stays with you more readily. When you grip it desperately, it finds ways to escape your grasp. When you use it as a tool for impact, it multiplies. When you hoard it as protection against uncertainty, it stagnates and diminishes. The steward's mindset transforms your entire relationship with financial uncertainty. Market downturns become portfolio rebalancing opportunities rather than personal catastrophes. Business losses become learning experiences rather than identity crises. Changes in income become chances for creative adaptation rather than existential threats. When your identity is not tied to your net worth, you can make clear-headed decisions based on wisdom rather than emotional reactions based on fear. When you understand that everything is temporary, you can enjoy what you have without being possessed by it. When you recognize that you are managing resources rather than owning them, you can be generous without feeling depleted. The practice is both simple and profound. Before making any financial decision, ask yourself this question: if I were managing this money for someone I deeply respect, someone whose interests I wanted to serve faithfully, what decision would I make? This single question will transform how you approach investments, spending, saving, and giving. It removes the emotional desperation that clouds judgment. It eliminates the anxiety that makes you clutch opportunities too tightly or miss them entirely through fear. When you are a steward rather than an owner, losses become redirections rather than disasters. Gains become opportunities for greater service rather than personal validation. Uncertainty becomes adventure rather than threat. Your role becomes meaningful rather than stressful. The wealthy understand intuitively that everything is a loan. They invest freely because they know that hoarding creates stagnation. They take calculated risks because they understand that preservation without growth is actually decay. They give generously because they recognize that circulation creates abundance. Stop trying to own what cannot be owned and start stewarding what has been temporarily entrusted to your care. This shift in perspective is not just a sign of readiness for wealth. It is the very mindset that allows wealth to trust itself to your management. When you treat money as a loan, it becomes a gift. When you hold it lightly, it stays with you longer. When you use it wisely, more resources seek you out for stewardship. Number 7, praying for discernment and acting with courage. You want the comfortable truth, don't you? The advice that confirms your existing beliefs, the guidance that doesn't require you to change anything fundamental about how you live. You pray for wealth, but not for the wisdom to handle it. You ask for opportunities, but not for the discernment to recognize which ones will destroy you. You seek abundance, but avoid the uncomfortable revelations that abundance requires. But here is what I learned in the most painful way possible. There is a prayer so dangerous that most people will never dare to pray it. Yet it is the only prayer that actually prepares you for the kind of wealth that transforms rather than corrupts. It is the prayer for truth, regardless of cost. The prayer for discernment, even when it exposes betrayals. The prayer for clarity, especially when it demands action you do not want to take. This is the prayer that will change everything about your relationship with money, but I must warn you, when you pray for discernment, you will receive it. And discernment always comes with a price. It will show you things about your life, your relationships, your choices that you would prefer not to see. It will demand courage that you may not feel ready to summon. It will require you to act on truth, even when acting on truth costs you everything you thought you wanted. Let me tell you about a situation that tested this principle in the most practical and terrifying way. I had an advisor who had been with me for years, a man whose counsel I trusted, whose friendship I valued, whose presence in my court seemed unquestionably beneficial. He was charismatic, intelligent, well-connected, and apparently loyal. But something began to disturb my peace when I was around him. Not something obvious, not something I could articulate, just a subtle unease that I initially dismissed as paranoia or ingratitude. He had served me well. What right did I have to question his motives? I began to pray that dangerous prayer. Show me the truth about this situation, regardless of what that truth costs me to see or act upon. For weeks, nothing changed. The unease remained, but no evidence appeared to justify it. I began to wonder if I was becoming suspicious and untrusting in my prosperity. Then slowly, patterns began to emerge. Small inconsistencies in his advice, subtle attempts to influence decisions that would benefit his business interests, recommendations that aligned too perfectly with the agendas of certain wealthy merchants who had been unusually generous in their gifts to him. The more clearly I saw, the more uncomfortable the truth became. This man whom I trusted was not necessarily evil, but he was compromised. His loyalty was divided between serving my interests and advancing his own. His counsel was subtly corrupted by conflicts of interest that he may not have even fully acknowledged to himself. Here was the test. I could ignore what I was beginning to see and maintain the comfort of our existing relationship. I could rationalize away the inconsistencies and preserve the status quo. Or I could act on incomplete but concerning evidence, risking the loss of a valued advisor based on intuition and subtle patterns rather than dramatic proof. The easier path was obvious. The right path was terrifying. Confronting him would create conflict, potentially damage his reputation, certainly disrupt the comfortable dynamics of my court. If I was wrong, I would have destroyed a valuable relationship over paranoid suspicions. If I was right but could not prove it, I would appear unstable and mistrusting. But discernment demands courage, and courage demands action despite incomplete information and potential consequences. I arranged a private conversation where I expressed my concerns directly, but respectfully, giving him an opportunity to address the conflicts I had observed. His reaction confirmed my worst fears. Instead of acknowledging the legitimate concerns or working to resolve the conflicts of interest, he became defensive, then angry, then accusatory. He suggested that my suspicions were evidence of paranoid leadership. He implied that my other advisors would lose trust in me if word of such unfounded accusations spread. Within hours of that conversation, I began to understand the true scope of what discernment had revealed. This man had been building a network of influence within my court, positioning himself as an alternative source of wisdom and favor. Several other advisors had been gradually influenced by his perspective. Their loyalty subtly shifted in his direction. What appeared to be simple conflict of interest was actually the beginning of a political challenge that could have divided my kingdom. My uncomfortable intuition had detected the early stages of a betrayal that would have become obvious only after it was too late to address effectively. The confrontation precipitated a crisis. Several advisors who had been influenced by him questioned my judgment. Some suggested that I was becoming paranoid in my power. Others wondered if success had made me distrustful of faithful service. For months, the stability of my court was threatened by the conflict that my pursuit of truth had created. But 6 months later, information emerged that vindicated my discernment completely. The dismissed advisor had indeed been building a coalition intended to challenge my decisions and potentially my authority. Documents were discovered that revealed the extent of his divided loyalties and hidden agendas. The advisors who had initially criticized my actions now praised my discernment. The crisis that had seemed like evidence of poor judgment was revealed to be the courageous prevention of a much larger disaster. Acting on uncomfortable truth despite social pressure had protected not just my reign, but the stability of the entire kingdom. This is what you must understand about the relationship between discernment and wealth. Life constantly presents you with tests disguised as opportunities. Every business partnership is a test of your ability to recognize character. Every investment opportunity is a test of your ability to distinguish substance from appearance. Every financial decision is a test of your willingness to choose long-term wisdom over short-term comfort. The prayer for discernment is spiritual surgery. It reveals the tumors in your financial life, the habits that appear harmless but slowly drain your resources, the beliefs that seem positive but actually limit your growth, the relationships that feel supportive but actually depend on keeping you small, the opportunities that look attractive but would ultimately compromise your integrity. When you pray for discernment, you might discover that your biggest financial obstacle is your need to be liked by people whose approval costs more than it's worth. You might realize that your most comfortable spending habits are actually forms of self-sabotage. You might understand that your safest investment strategies are preventing the growth that would create genuine security. Discernment will show you these truths, but it will not make acting on them comfortable. It will give you clarity, but it will not eliminate the cost of choosing clarity over convenience. This is where courage becomes essential. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to do what is right despite fear. The practice is challenging but transformative. Before every significant financial decision, pause and ask for clarity about the true nature of what you are considering. Not clarity about whether it will be profitable, but clarity about whether it will be right. Not insight into whether others will approve, but understanding of whether it serves your highest integrity. Then, when clarity comes, act on it immediately despite the cost. If discernment reveals a toxic business relationship, end it even if it means short-term financial loss. If insight shows you that an opportunity would compromise your values, decline it even if others think you are foolish. If wisdom indicates that you need to change a comfortable pattern that is limiting your growth, change it even if change is uncomfortable. This is not just a sign of readiness for wealth. This is the very process that creates readiness for wealth. When you consistently choose truth over comfort, integrity over convenience, wisdom over social approval, you develop the character that wealth can trust. Money seeks out those who will not be corrupted by its power, who will not be paralyzed by its responsibilities, who will not be blinded by its opportunities. The prayer for discernment and the courage to act on what discernment reveals is how you prove yourself worthy of such trust. Pray the dangerous prayer, and then live courageously with the uncomfortable truth it reveals. This is the final preparation for wealth that transforms rather than destroys. Picture a river that has been flowing for thousands of years, carving its path through stone not through force, but through persistence. Each day, the water moves forward, shaping the landscape grain by grain, creating valleys where once there were mountains. The river does not announce its power. It does not demand recognition for its work. It simply flows, and in flowing, it transforms everything it touches. You are that river now. Every moment you choose silence over the noise of approval, every time you prioritize wisdom over immediate gain, every instance you refuse to let money become your emotional crutch, you are carving new pathways in the landscape of your existence. The person you were when this journey began is already becoming the person you are meant to be. The 7 signs are not checkboxes to complete. They are states of being to inhabit. They are not achievements to earn. They are transformations to embody. Each day you live from this deeper understanding, you emit a frequency that wealth recognizes and responds to. Not the desperate frequency of need, but the calm resonance of readiness. Something profound is shifting in you right now. Can you feel it? The anxious grasping is loosening. The frantic chasing is slowing. The need to prove yourself is dissolving. In its place, a quiet confidence is emerging, a trust in the process, a faith in your own worthiness. This is not the end of your transformation. This is the deepening of it. If you sense that this journey of inner alignment calls to something deeper within you, if you feel drawn to continue walking this path of wisdom and authentic prosperity, then subscribe and let this be the beginning of your true becoming. The river flows because it must. You transform because it is your nature. Wealth finds you because you have become findable.